Good afternoon. I had the paella. What did you all have? I'm so excited for this talk. Today we're hoping to host a talk that's going to be beyond the headlines. It's going to go straight into the truth of what it is to build a business, and I don't think we could have picked a better panel, so thanks for being here. Josh, we'll start with you. Flashfood is a marketplace that helps grocers distribute food that's getting close to the best before date, and it's really an amazing, impactful company that helps ultimately reduce food waste. I'm curious, going back to the beginning, maybe you could tell us about where the idea came from and where that aha moment was.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being here. The story was my sister was a chef. She called me after a catering event. She's like, I just threw out $4,000 worth of food. I'm like, Paula, you idiot. Why'd you do that? She's like, no, this feeling sucks. I feel horrible. So for the next few days, I started reading about food waste. And what I learned is when food gets thrown out, it usually ends up in a landfill, gets covered by other garbage, and when it rots, doesn't have any oxygen. And that whole process produces methane gas. So the statistic is if international food waste were a country, it'd be the third leading cause of greenhouse gas emission behind the US and China, which just floored me. And at the time, I lived on top of a grocery store, and I thought, how much food do they throw out every day, and what's the lead time from the time they throw the food out to the sell-by date? And I learned that in North America, we throw out $5,000 to $10,000 worth of food every day at grocery stores, and that food's anywhere from 2 to 3 days before the sell-by date. So the idea was if there's a way for them to mark the price of the food down, sending me a notification, I could see it through my phone, pay through my phone, pick it up in the store the same day. People would shop like that all the time. And that's what we built. Discount food rack, made it look cool, put it on your cell phone.
What's the first step for that business?
I got connected to a whole bunch of people. One of them was a former executive at one of the big retailers, and he had told me that the year before, between 40 stores that he oversaw, they threw out $140 million of food. So that was like, okay, this is a B2B2C play, so like you have to sell to the retailers and you need customers. From a customer perspective, there's like TV shows on people discounting and like using binders full of coupons. So I didn't need to solve for that. I need to know how much food was at the store. And then the second piece was, will they actually partner with us? And I think it fell into this funny space where like, it is a big number, it is a big problem, but it's not big enough for them to solve it themselves because these are multi-billion-dollar companies. So it was a really interesting niche that we ended up getting into. But the first step was like, okay, validate how much these retailers are actually throwing out.
Wow. That's awesome. Tara, you are in a new role now, but I want to go back to the founding of Iris Tech in 2015. I was really impressed to hear your story. You used your PhD in image processing to build, and I'm going to have to look at it because it's so technical, a perceptual display software for automotive and consumer devices. A thing that now is in the Mercedes-Benz E-Class convertibles and helps people see on their display dashboards. That's really technical and super niche. So I'd love to hear about like the early days of building in such a niche industry.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. Hi, everyone. We are going blind over here, so we will need AI for eyes afterwards to figure out our issues, but sunglasses would have been needed. We don't see a lot of you, so if you come a bit closer, I think, because the room is massively full, that would be better for interacting with you. Thank you, Kyle. So going back to Iris Tech, yes, it was massively technical. It was a big R&D project. It was a spin-off from the PhD. And it's interesting how, from my perspective, I was a techie that found my way into entrepreneurship. I learned the business without going to school and do an MBA the hard way. I have a lot of gray hair because of that. So if you can do an MBA, do it. But absolutely, so selling hardcore tech is probably very, very different. You need to have what we call evangelism, open up a market for it, make sure that the communication of a high tech is with the right audience on the other side, whether they're customers or investors. So it's very, very different when you talk about consumer apps that is very understandable and tangible for everyone, rather than a technology which goes in your display and it makes it more lasting in terms of the battery consumption of the display, and it makes it more visible. Now, it was definitely a learning process in terms of how to pitch, how to convince, how to have the role that we called it technical sales was always key in our organization because it was the chief convincing officer of everybody.
Wow. And we'll go into more of the story of Iris Tech because it ended up getting acquired and there's great lessons there. But now you're in health tech, so maybe you tell us about that jump.
I'm not a real doctor, so let's start there. I get that nowadays a lot. I have a PhD in computer, but it's not a real doctor. So I work with ODs and ophthalmologists. Health tech is new to me. When I've been through 3 industries before, telecommunication, consumer, and then automotive. Automotive was massively different from the other 2 because of the regulations and standards, etc. And then I was thinking I'll try health tech or fintech because I like challenging myself with stuff that I don't know shit about. And it has been interesting. It's the last 6 months that I'm learning about it, about all the regulatory paths, etc. But then when it comes to building a product that the end user wants, the AI, the SaaS part of it, it's what I've done before. So it's a good balance of learning stuff, but also being able to use some of the past experience.
Love it. And Peter, you are by far one of the most diverse founders I've ever met. You have built companies in food, finance, energy, cannabis, and tech. You've had 4 exits. One was a healthy food fast chain, and one was an equipment leasing company. One you just told me about backstage, a data analytics. I can't read my reading. Yeah, and then you were also you sold a cannabis production company. So kind of all over the map. So I'm kind of wondering for those of us who are potentially looking for an idea, like do ideas just follow you? Like do you have an idea generator machine or something that we should know about?
Why are you doing this all over again? Put yourself through this pain.
That too.
Yeah, that is probably part 2 of the question, the conversation. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Marie. Honestly, like if I had ideas follow me home, I'd have a lot of shitty ideas, like sitting in my basement right now, because like I've just been very curious by nature my entire life. I started my first company when I was 16 years old, and it's funny. I'm gonna date myself, but this is like 16 years old in the late 80s, early 90s. My very first company was literally going door to door with a drill, and the company was called Pete's Peoples, which in retrospect is actually a terrible name, right? Like now.
I kind of like it.
But I got the idea because when someone knocked on my door, I didn't have any way to look out. I had to look at the door, I had to open it, and it was someone trying to sell me something. And I went door to door. I'm like, this would be a great idea, is just knock on doors and see where there's no Peoples in there and try to sell them like my ability to install Peoples. The idea was terrible because like no one wants literally a 16-year-old kid with a drill drilling a hole in their mahogany door. But at the time, it was like that was a whole spurring on the curiosity of like starting ideas. So that's kind of my entire career. I think earlier on, I was probably more stupid and fearless because I didn't know any better. So as you get more into how to build companies, how to operationalize them, how to sell them, you just become more intuitive in terms of like the framework that exists, right? So yeah, it's more than anything, it's just the curiosity I've had of my entire career for over 28 years of starting companies and fixing problems essentially.
And to Tara's point, I mean, at this point, after 4 exits, a lot of folks would be angel investing from a beach, but you're doing it again. So what's wrong with you?
Yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment, I think. So true story. So I had the 2 exits in 2018, 2009. So 2018, I sold the data analytics company for the not-for-profit sector, and in 2019 I sold the cannabis company. So we were the company that was partnered up with the Tragically Hip. It was called New Strike Brands. We had a pretty big production facility in Niagara County, and it was like the wildest ride because it was like back-to-back exits, and I was the president of Global Faces, but I was on the board as well as very active consulting-wise for New Strike. So it was the most chaotic few years, just kind of building that up, and it was like I kind of thrived in that chaos. So when the exit had happened, it was like literally everything stopped. Like my emails, which were like 100 emails a day, I get like 1 email from Shoe Company or Loblaws or something like that. It was just like, and it was like that was the moment in time where I'm like, okay, you're not wanted, you're not needed anymore. I did everything that you typically do, is you buy. I bought a house in Naples, Florida. I bought a house in Costa Rica, and I was vacationing. And then you kind of realize the entire theory around, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this, was the arrival fallacy, which is basically the whole concept around you think you've made it and you think you've worked this hard to get to this level and you realize it's not even close to what you thought it was going to be. That happened to me where I got really depressed, I got really anxious, and I'm like, there's got to be something more. So I decided to go back in to becoming a founder as well as investing in companies. The only problem was I basically met my match, so to speak. Like right now, Tre'dish is by far the hardest build, and Josh could probably attest for this. Food is an incredibly hard problem to solve. And we just happen to be right pressed up against the worst market, I would arguably say, for the past 30 years, by far. So
This is
Because
not
you
how,
haven't done medtech.
this is not how I view the world, and that was this is my only journey so far, so it's kind of good to hear how hard food is.
yeah, food is brutal.
And maybe tell us a little bit about Tre'dish, because I haven't mentioned it yet.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit below the supply chain based on what Josh has built. Josh has built an amazing model because essentially it's an amazing impact thesis, tons of wastage, tons of spoilage. We actually do the opposite in terms of earlier on the supply chain. So right now, the way grocery stores work, everyone knows this. Let me start off by the impact thesis. Cost of living is an all-time high. Food inflation is an all-time high. Discretionary income cannot solve the problem in terms of how would I afford a roof over my head and food on the table. The average household of 4 pays roughly about $17,000 a year for groceries. So it's not something to shy away from. But if you look at the current Canadian oligopoly, it's a basically $1 trillion industry right now, and it's all based on heavy costs within the supply chain. Distribution, multiple distribution, multiple layers of bricks and mortar, merchandising costs, spoilage overages. So everything associated with all those middleman costs are costs that they're definitely below and they can be somehow optimized. We've done that. So we found a way to essentially go directly from wholesaler, using our app, wholesaler, right to the consumer, and then essentially saving 30% on groceries. So it's a hard, the reason why I say it's such a hard model to figure out is because there's so many different touch points in that supply chain that you have to optimize each and every one of them. But we've started off in Ontario, we've expanded to 14 regions in the GTA, and yeah, we're completing a seed financing right now, a follow-on financing that my family office is leading. But it's, like I said, it's not easy because everything about what we're doing is a very big build. It's not your typical AI type of thing where you can actually build with 2 founders. There is a lot of logistics and supply chain that you got to figure out here. So, yeah.
Amazing. A lot of times when we talk about building a business, we focus about the yeses. We focus on the yeses, this company raised this much money, or this company closed this contract. But I guess I want to go into the no's, and maybe we'll start with you, Josh. What is the hardest no you've ever received?
Yeah, well, there's a few of them. One of them, there's a retailer in America, and I did the whole spiel on food waste and the environment, and we can make you so much money. And I met with the CEO and the COO. This is a multi-billion-dollar company, and they listen to the whole thing. There's no questions. And then they're just yeah, we're good. I'm what? They're yeah, we're just good. I'm you're good to keep throwing out all this food? They're yeah. So then over the years, anytime anybody's been let me introduce you to that company, I'm it's okay. I don't need to talk to them. But there was another story that we went through a program called TechStars, and it was TechStars Retail in Target's head office in Minneapolis. So I lived there for 3 months. And through that program, you get paired with mentors. And I ended up getting Brian Cornell, the CEO of Target, as my lead mentor. So we'd meet every month, and we still did up until COVID. And through the program, selling into big companies is really hard. And I remember I was flying home toward the end of the program. It was I think there was the last 2 weeks, so I was going to go back and forth. And we were dealing with this food team, and they finally got back to us on whether we could do a pilot or not. And they're hey, sorry, this isn't going to work for us. So I remember I'm sitting against the window in economy, and there's 2 people beside me, and I didn't have, I didn't pay for the Wi-Fi, and my wallet was up top. So I'm whatever. I got the other people out of the aisle, went up, grabbed my wallet, came back down, paid for Wi-Fi, and basically wrote an email to Brian being why the fuck are you guys running all these innovation programs if you're not going to do anything about it? And this is such a glaring ROI from a financial perspective. I didn't swear in it, obviously, and I was respectful, but it was pretty I'm going home anyway. I'm not coming back to Minneapolis. And then sure enough, we ended up getting a pilot. The food team got back to us I wasn't a couple hours. It was probably a couple days. But then the other funny thing about that is the pilot went incredible, great metrics, all this stuff. And then at the end, they're like, yeah, we're not scaling this. Like, thanks. Like, we're going to take you out of the stores now. And the other lesson there was like, you want to be really smart about how you get into these big organizations. Because you could piss like the wrong person off and their boss can volunteer them to do something. But effectively, like somebody's going to have the chance to make a decision on something that's in their vertical. That's how like all these big companies work. So you just have to be really careful about that. But that no was like one of the biggest amongst like every day. There's 1,000 no's.
Yeah, and we had this side conversation this morning with a few people, and it's a big watch out for startups because like my company that I had before, Sampler, we basically won every startup innovation thing you could ever win at Kraft Heinz, at Unilever, at L'Oreal, and these innovation programs, they do sometimes end up like being like in a secluded area in an organization. And to your point, if like the team that actually does the work is not bought in, then it will only be good for like a year, right?
Yeah, if you're lucky. And you're so right. And same with like the sustainability team. Like teams don't act, in these big companies, they don't action the sustainability team. There was one other story that's relevant. We met with the leaders of this digital part of one of the biggest retailers in the world that had like one of the most sophisticated digital arms in grocery, and I met with the top 2 people in the organization. And at the end of the meeting, they were like, look, we can't partner with you until you raise at least $10 million. It's too risky for us. Literally 2 weeks later, I met with the head of operations of half of the business. She was like, I'll have you in 3 stores next month. 6 months later, we're across the country. So it's like you can get a no from somebody in the same company, but like different division, and there's just, you don't even know what you don't know about the organization. Yeah. So that's just like a learning that I think everybody should carry with them.
Yeah, find your champion. Staying on the nose, and if anybody else wants to jump in on this one, what's the hardest no you ever gave? Because we have to give no's too.
You're asking me now?
Oh, I don't know, Josh, whoever.
Oh, hardest no I gave. It's probably the one we did just before the exit to a company, potential acquirer, which was paying by far more. The offer was more, but they were not going to keep the whole team. And we had this list that we made before of our kind of the framework, the red lines that we are not going to cross. We knew that if we don't keep that small team, the product is going to die, and that's what we all were kind of rallying around. And there's a story, my whole team stayed around during 2 times of going almost bankrupt. So that was probably the hardest one, not necessarily for me, but for our board, for the company. That was the hardest no we gave. So saying no to 3x more money.
Good for you.
I don't know if any of my past investors, want to tag along and jump into this new one. Yeah, it was not an easy discussion with them, no. But we got alignment.
That's awesome.
Do you regret it?
I don't. I stayed with the parent company for 4 years. I don't know if they regret. I don't think anybody regrets it, honestly, because we had that like alignment prior. So before even talking to any acquirers, before putting ourselves on the market, we had like a list of things we will say yes to, we will say no to. That came handy so crazily. And then the other company, we kind of saw how they deal with the potential companies that they acquire later on. So I think, yeah, it was the right decision. I don't regret.
That's a really good takeaway too for anyone who, like, if you're going to be making a big decision for your business, aligning on what is required to make that decision before the emotions get into it is such a smart idea. Love that. Anybody else have a hard no they want to share?
Well, to Tara's point, I think the biggest thing that exists in the market right now are like, I'm not going to say predatory VCs, but it's a buyer's market right now, right? So the VC market has typically always been like, I'm going to downside my risk by whether it be liquidity preferences, whether it be ratchet rights, whatever the case might be. So the hard no usually comes from if you believe in what your model is, like you have to be as scrappy as possible in terms of like how you actually raise capital. And it's not going to necessarily come from VCs. That shouldn't be your first check in. It should be more capital. It should be family offices. It should be high net worth individuals. It should be family. And do whatever you can to be as scrappy as possible, because that no, like I said no to a VC that literally like they had a 2x liquidity preference in which, as well as consent rights, of which it would have crippled everything associated with one of my other companies, that you just have to be confident in terms of like, can you pull it off? Now, there's many times you just need to take whatever money is on the table, but saying that no is pretty difficult, but it's gonna ultimately, be for the longevity of your company.
How many of you are entrepreneurs in the room? Okay, keep your hand up. How many of you doubt yourself at least once a week? At least once a day? Oh, good. Okay, so once a week. We always talk about imposter syndrome and how that comes into play. So I want to ask our panelists, what is maybe a moment where, one of the hardest moments where you really doubted yourself, and how did you overcome that?
So I could, you just do stuff, but I could tell like the biggest imposter syndrome story from my end. So we, as part of the journey, we went through a program called Next Founders, and Next Founders is run by somebody named Reza Satchu, who's a serial entrepreneur who was a prof at U of T and is now one of the top profs at Harvard. And he's put cases together from some of the Next Canada journey. And so Flashfood is a case study at HBS, and I've been going back for the last 4 years. And it's a class called Founders Mindset. And I joke that it's like the roast of Josh, because it's basically like at the beginning of the course where he talks about the curse of optionality. The people in the room that are doing their MBA at Harvard have so many options, and they have too many options, and they keep the options available through their whole life. And what that means is they fail to commit to something and driving hard at it. And then he's basically like, look at this idiot who went to a terrible school, who knew nothing about grocery, and like, look what he's pulled off. Think about what you all can accomplish. Is effectively like, I'm half joking, but that's actually the class. So in terms of like imposter syndrome, going to Harvard to do like an HBS case on the company that you started is like, it's insane.
It's funny because I was also part of the next program, the Next Founder program, and Reza has invited me to be a case study at HBS. I'm gonna tell you a worse HBS moment. I lost my term sheet for my Series B. It was the beginning of the demise of Sampler. The morning of my HBS presentation, and Reza asked the Harvard students if they would invest. And it was a 50-50 split, and I had lost the term sheet. And then he's like, do you want to do office hours? And I said, absolutely not.
Wow. And then
So
you're just like crying the whole flight home.
Yes, and in 6 months pregnant.
I have a similar one. I had a 3-month-old kid. I was nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year. I'm going to accept the award, like we are in the suit, like we are suit up, like we're going there to get the award. And I'm like, we will get this and it's gonna be good. And we had a big partnership that the no came, and this, like a lot of financing was tied to that. The no came 1 hour before, like it was 7 p.m. and the 6 I received the email. I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't win the award. I don't deserve this. Like, what did I do? So everything was falling apart. And there are videos and pictures of me of that ceremony. I'm like, this whole time. And everybody was wishing that they will win. I'm like, I wish I don't win. I wish I don't win. I didn't, but.
Oh, man. I joke that like every day of my life is the best day of my life and every day of my life is the worst day of my life, and it just depends on what email comes in. It's like, you're the smartest ever, you're a complete idiot, this thing's gonna crash and burn. And like as an entrepreneur, you just like learn to like be even keel, but like that still happens.
Yeah. How about you?
Imposter syndrome? I've grown up with imposter syndrome my entire life. Like, at the end of the day, I was like, I'm Asian, by the way, Korean, and I'm not your typical intellectual Korean academic. So like my oldest sister is, she graduated, master's, PhD, and like pride of my parents. But my middle sister and myself, we're the street rats of the family. We're like hustlers, like you would not believe. Really quick story, like Sophia, this Hwang, Judah, she was the president of Hudson's Bay Company, president of Tommy Hilfiger. Now she runs global retail for Samsung in Korea. She literally graduated with a poli-sci degree, and she worked Le Chateau, Daniel Leather in store management, and then just worked her way up. I don't know how the hell she does it, but she's like the scrappiest street rat. Now she's running one of the biggest companies, global retail in the world right now. I took the entrepreneurial route, but very similar in that I just was like always curious. always in these rooms, but it was the most stressful. The reason why I tell Sophia's story is that she tells the same parallel path on the corporate side, in which every single room from a glass ceilings perspective, there was like white men executives in the room that she had to compete against, and that was her growing up. It's different now, don't get me wrong, but this is back in the like 80s, 90s, in which I did this every single pitch I did for every investor, every family office, every institutional where I pitched, it'd be the whitest Bay Street crew. Like, if that's the way it was, right? So as an Asian, if you're not smart, street smarts, and you're trying to be like almost like in the bro world, actually pitching these deals and stuff like that, you have to have a pretty good personality, you have to really be good sales, you have to be really have high conviction on what you're doing. So yeah, imposter syndrome all the time, because I didn't have your typical Asian academic background, right? So all the time I had to kind of figure out a way to navigate through those rooms.
And Peter, you had 4 exits, and then you had 1 failed startup. And when we chatted, the first thing you said is that the one that you think about the most is the failed one. And then yesterday, you wrote this beautiful post about your 25th year wedding anniversary, so congratulations. And you speak about kind of this, like how wonderful your wife is to have really supported you through, especially that exit. So maybe you, or that failure. So maybe you can chat about that.
So true story. Cindy was supposed to come here today, but she didn't want to come. She was in Florida. And then Josh pinged me, because I guess he read my LinkedIn post. He's like, "Are you freaking crazy, man? It's like you're coming to Montreal on your 25th wedding anniversary, bailing on your wife."
And it's like, you're not making it to 26. Like, you should probably stay in Florida.
And he's like, "Let me make a post and thank her on social media."
I didn't buy a gift yet, so here, let me do a post. No, but true story. That post was like probably the most, and for anyone on LinkedIn right now, and anyone entrepreneurial on LinkedIn, like the whole premise about LinkedIn is like, the newest thing is you got to build in public. If you want to raise capital, if you want to get customers, like low capital, be very efficient, build in public, like put yourself out there. I've never wanted to put myself out there, but I've started to do it literally in the last 4 years, mainly because I think my voice can get out there and it can help a lot of people. But yesterday, I just literally put something out there that was just almost a summary of my life with Cindy, because LinkedIn is not your typical like pour your heart out emotional thing, but I did it in the context about my entrepreneurial journey. Cindy is like literally the most calm. She's a teacher, calm, patient, like even-keel individual. I'm the most psychotic, impulsive, like ebbs and flows entrepreneur. I talk about my 5 startups, 4 exits. But the reality is the four exits, you have a short-term memory on the exits. It's kind of what I talked about earlier. Like, I don't really care about, I'm not driven by money. I'm not driven by overall success. I'm driven by like solving problems. So true story, we had a going public transaction in 2008, in which we built this company up to a $15 million run rate, 15,000 customers, about to go public. And then July 2008 hits, where the housing market collapses and our term sheet gets pulled. And right now, at that particular point, I think we're $3 million in debt. The term sheet was for $5.5 million, and it would have paid off. We wouldn't have paid off all the debt, but it would have been like really, really good for now us to continue growth of our business. That term sheet gets pulled overnight, and it was, I don't remember the clause, but it was like clause 16.6, which is like act of God or financial market collapse, something relative to like their way out. And it was the most difficult point in my career where I invested everything in the company. So to clarify, when I talk about, that was my 3rd exit. Third company, the previous 2 were small, very small exits. So they were in no way, shape, or form changed my life. But everything I made, I invested back into this company, and I had a significant amount of debt. We double mortgaged, we had 2 mortgages on our house. And I remember coming home that day, and Cindy was literally like, she was 6 months pregnant. We have 2 young daughters, 6 months pregnant. I didn't tell this on LinkedIn. She was actually digging the trench, like helping dig the trench for whatever reason, because we had this like backyard.
Make it more
project.
dramatic for this
Exactly.
story.
Yes. It was not, I didn't put it on LinkedIn though. I'm 6 months pregnant, and I had the conversation where they're saying like, listen, I think like we are going to be in a lot of trouble. And I'm short-circuiting the conversation because it was the most tearful, emotional conversation we had. And I realized that moment right then and there was probably the pinnacle of like where who you pick as a partner, and I'm not even talking about like a spouse, I'm talking about anyone you pick as a partner, whether it be a co-founder, whether it be a friend, whether it be, you'll know immediately who your tribe is and who your actual, the closest to you are. Because in the best of times, everyone wants to be your friend. Everyone wants to be the 10th, employee of Uber, or the, 86th employee of Airbnb. They'll list that on their LinkedIn, they'll promote that, but no one wants to be, the second co-founder of a company that, went bankrupt. Or so when I talked to Cindy about it, she basically just said, like, listen, you and I have come up together with nothing. Like, if we have to start over again, everything will be okay. And that was probably the one moment in time where I'm like, holy shit, this one is an absolute keeper, because if she can go through my crazy and then be there to ground me when things are really, really bad, then ultimately, hopefully when things are good and things turn around, she'll be there as well. And that's what happened. I had two pretty significant life-changing exits in 2018, 2019. And yeah, everything about kind of what I remembered was that whole theory around, like, your people at the best of times are gonna be abundant, but the individuals in the worst of times are gonna be pretty scarce. It's gonna be the loneliest existence as an entrepreneur, and that's just a fact. I don't know if anyone's going through, or has gone through troubles, or where I know you have, like, it's a really lonely existence being the last person standing on the ship, right? So that's, when I told that story, literally, like, all my posts do okay. This one had like 80,000 impressions in a matter of like six hours, 1,000 likes. It's like kind of crazy, but I think that's what people want to hear. They want to hear that support mechanism of, like, the entrepreneurial journey is hard. They want to see how people get through it.
How long did it take you to get back up after that?
I started Global Faces in 2012. So 2008 was when that collapsed. 2009 and 10, I still stuck with it. I was very stubborn. I didn't bankrupt the company. I literally pushed on, restructured the company, couldn't get out of the full debt. And in 2010, we closed the company. And then I was literally I was dark and just doing consulting. And I was like, typically what you do is consulting, and you try to take, as much as the goodness of what you've learned, and you consult with companies. So I did that for 2 years, and then I got back on the horse in 2012.
That's awesome. I kind of want to double click on that, maybe from my own personal experience, but, like, do you think that was really good to take 2 years to kind of go dark, or?
I think everyone has their own period of, like, for lack of a better term, mourning. It's funny, like, the term PTSD is very real for founders, I'm telling you. Like, if you go through a moment in time, and I don't want to, like, everyone has their levels of pain, what PTSD means and stuff like that, but when it comes to, like, a failed startup, and you put everything into it, you pour everything into it, it's pretty painful. Like, it really is one of those things, like, it's almost like losing someone dear to you, because, like, you put everything into it and all of a sudden it's gone, right? But there's a flip side of that in terms of, like, all your thought process of people who let down. I had friends that invested in the company. So doubling down on that point, like, this, when I talk about you'll find out your tribe, I literally had one of my best friends, he's a plumber, had no money. He was one of the investors in this round that did not go public. I had someone that was another friend that was very wealthy. Losing $100,000 was nothing to him. That individual came to me nonstop, like, why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? My buddy who's a plumber, not a word. He's like, buddy, like, it happens. It is what it is. Like, you tried. I saw how hard you worked. Like, I'll support you whatever you need to support. So, like, those are the type of things that you realize when times are difficult, like what comes up. So to answer your question, Marie, like, it was like, I just had to process that. I went through a couple of years of just like quiet, trying to process it, trying to get my confidence back. And then once you get your confidence back, like, the biggest thing, ironically, the people that approached me for Global Faces, which was in 2012, was individuals that were part of the failed company. They actually were a sales agency that said, Peter, like, I know we didn't do very well together at NY's, but, like, I really want to start this business with you. And they came and approached me, and they wouldn't have approached me if I bankrupt the company immediately and just shut down doors. Like, they saw me work my ass off, so, like, I have this idea, can we partner up together? So you have to always take the good out of it, but you just need time to decompress and realize, okay, what was your true learning, so you actually move on and move forward.
There's a theme that doesn't get talked about ever. I don't hear about it like much at all. But so the first thing is like a lot of like advice that you're getting from folks in this conference and in others, from like different leaders and founders. Like the truth is like you just have to do stuff. Like it's hard to do a lot of the stuff, and the only person who can do it is you oftentimes, and you just have to do it. The other thing is, if you build a company and it is not successful in the way that you envision it at the beginning, what I had seen through growing Flashfood is like, if I don't pull this off, my guess was that I was going to be more employable. And by that, and the measure that I had in my mind was like, my salary will probably be higher if I fail this thing than it would have been if I just stayed in the thing that I was doing before. And I actually tracked that for the first few years. So for the first like couple years, I made like nothing. I think I was at like, maybe before I started Flashfood, I was making like $110,000 my last year. I got a big commission check for something. And then I went to like nothing, maybe 30K, 60K, got back to 120-ish around like year 5 or something, and then like exceeded what I was making before after that. So it was a long journey to get back. But the thing that I was tracking the whole time was like, had I had stayed doing what I was doing, like one, the financial gains from like a job would not have paid me more at year 4 if the company died than I would have been paid from another new employer because of all the shit that I learned along the journey. And like, you go through so many things when you're the one leading and making the decisions and doing all of these things. Like, it's only you who's doing it. And a lot of big company people wish that they would have taken that risk. And so you go meet with a VP or something, or an SVP after, and like, and I've seen this from friends who have also started companies that have not been successful in the way that they had hoped it would be at the beginning. And you could talk about failure, and like success and failure means different things. But from a financial output, they didn't become millionaires, and it like barely even sold if it did sell. But they got hired making probably 2 or 2.5 times more than they would have had they just stayed in their career through the 4 or 5 year journey. So I just wanted to like, that part of what you're actually getting paid, I think is a benefit to start a company because you learn so much and you're so much more employable. And then the other thing is like, from a personal learning perspective, it is not even close, the amount of learnings that you have by being the person in the seat making the decisions. And like, for all the mistakes that you make, like having humility and an openness, and your plumber friend being like, you're working your ass off. Like, as long as you're honest about things, like, it's just such a better journey to go on, in my opinion.
On your friend, the plumber, like someone told me once, if someone is writing you a check, they should be able to lose it. And that's their responsibility to make. So that's just something to offer on that front. I want to just close off the discussion around failure with just some parting thoughts. Everyone's going to deal with failure differently. I failed my business. My business was at a peak of $10 million, and it ended up, spiraling into failure. And we bankrupted last year. A year later, I'm standing on this stage, the CEO of Canada's largest community, and I am a new Marie. But to Josh's point, I am a new Marie because of all of these crazy learnings that I had as a CEO. And I just want to leave that thought to say, knowing that you will be more than okay if your company fails is very important in your journey. Every day, it is important that we are afraid of failure because that keeps us going, but you will be just fine. You will have a second chapter, a third chapter. Heck, if you're like this guy over here, you'll have like 17 chapters in different industries.
It's because I'm 51, though, let's be clear. I have been doing this for 28 years, so this is like the moment in time.
So I just want to make sure that everyone, feels that deeply. We're going to be running out of time, so I'm going to just ask one more question and then go into fire round. Maybe for people here, maybe we talk a little bit about your fundraising journey and a raw tip that you all have as it relates to fundraising.
Part of the failure being okay with hearing no, especially now in this atmosphere. We were talking about that before with Peter and Josh, that understanding, maybe if I have one advice besides have stamina for this long run, it's like if the ratio of hearing no's was, no to yes was 100 to 1 before, now it's 100 to 0.002. But besides that, it's to understand the dynamics of the other person on the table, whether it's a strategic, whether it's an institution, whether it's an angel, understanding why sometimes there is a no. I said this in the Women in Tech this morning as well. Why the no comes. Is it a no that I want to turn into a yes, or is it a no I want to walk away from? And this is very difficult. It was so difficult for me as someone that has grit and wants to convince everyone to know, shall I insist on this? Bring this one, bring that one, this milestone, that milestone. And sometimes it's just that hidden, unspoken thing, we are closing the fund. But they're not going to tell you. Or it's like, we're going to change this big EVP, and that's not going to happen. So my advice would be to do a bit of your due diligence around which no's are worth to insist to turn into a yes, and which no's you should just take and walk away and save your energy.
I want to make sure everyone's crystal clear on this. Like this, when I talk about this market right now, I would actually argue, and I lost my other company in 2008. This is by far a worse market than 2008. I actually use the analogy of like 2008 being like literally a bludgeon over the head with a sledgehammer, and all of a sudden like a year later it was fine because the mortgage rates like got cheap, and all of a sudden everyone was buying again, right? So think of it in the context of like what that market was versus today. I lost my business in 2008, but in 2021, like I would say mid-2022, there was actually a Y Combinator letter that came out that basically was a cautionary letter to all their portfolio companies that said, hey, anyone who raised a seed round, and keep in mind, these are seed founders that might have started their first company, right? They're saying, hey, use this money that I gave you, which might be $1.5 million, to get the product market fit, get to default to live, or get to like literally profitability. All three are ridiculously hard if you don't even know what you're building, right? So let's be clear on that. That was pretty much, for lack of a better term, a death sentence for all these different founders that have never built a company before. They don't know how to restructure the company. So when that happened, it was very much that you saw the downfall happening. And in the Y Combinator letter, like there's a tweet, they basically said, expect not to get fundraising for the next 18 months. It's now over 3 years. So it's a very difficult market right now. So put that into context, like raising money is gonna be far harder. I was telling Josh earlier today, like I run a family office, so I wear two hats, obviously as a founder, but also an investor. The offers that I'm getting from deals are not just really amazing deals from a seed round perspective, like really, really good deals that are actually almost at product market fit right now, I believe, because they have good customers. But I'm also getting like what they call secondary trade deals, which are like deals where initial investors are trying to get off their deal, off the paper, and they're willing to sell at a massive discount. Like that exists right now. So it's such a competing market right now, and everyone just has to acknowledge that. Like fundraising is extraordinarily difficult, and you have to be like very cognizant of obviously, the no's that exist, and just be aware that you might do 5x more meetings.
Yeah. We're going to get kicked off. So I'm going to ask you just one last question. What's one mindset or motto or mantra that you live by as an entrepreneur that you could leave everyone with?
I'm going to repeat myself with a morning session, courage over comfort. This is from Brené Brown, but you have to practice it every day. Courage over comfort. I love that.
Just have a short-term memory. Like at the end of the day, stuff that goes bad, and that's the nature of entrepreneurship. That's the nature of being a founder. So just have a really short-term memory and know that this too shall pass and things will get better. It always does. Like I've seen 2 market turns, and it's going to get better. It will.
I had a loved one pass away, like through a battle with cancer, through the journey of building the company. And the thing that I'll leave people with is like, it's just a company. You're just starting a company. It's not your identity, and it's not life or death. So just keep that in the back of your mind, because sometimes it's hard to remember that.
Well, thank you. That was a packed with insight conversation. Really appreciate you all being here. Thank you.